Have you ever gotten the opportunity to learn about another culture? Well, today you will learn about deaf culture. Deaf culture is the cultural background that comes along with being deaf and what it means to be deaf. Although you probably haven't heard of deaf culture till today I will teach you. You will learn some of the basics of deaf culture. For the last 4 years, I have learned and studied about deaf culture in high school, and I've had plenty of interaction with members of the deaf community. Deaf culture is not only the study of culture, but of their language, and as well as the stigma that comes along with being deaf. Today, I will first talk about deaf pride, and then I will discuss capital D for deaf, and finally, I will take a look at ASL. Pride is what makes people feel good about their own culture, and it helps them embrace, and it helps them not be embarrassed of who they are, and helps them embrace themselves. Deaf pride is having pride in what the rest of the world would consider disability. Deaf people are proud of who they are. They do not see themselves as disabled. They express themselves in many ways, but some of the ways they express themselves are through events that they have, and also by having a whole month dedicated to deaf pride. They do not see deafness as a disability, but instead as a gain, also known as deaf gain. This has opened many doors for them in the world where they are supported in the deaf world, and in the deaf world they are also supported by others that are just like them, and they are not bashed for being who they are. Pride plays a major role. Pride plays a major role in culture, but identity is also very important when it comes to culture. Capital D for deaf is the bridge between being deaf, medically diagnosed, and being deaf culturally. Capital D for deaf, according to the AI Media blog article, the difference between lowercase d, capital case deaf, and hard of hearing by Gemma Mathewson. Gemma Mathewson shows that being capital D for deaf is people who identify as culturally deaf and active amongst the deaf community and use sign language to communicate with others around them. Lowercase d for deaf is for people who simply refer to deafness as just a medical condition that can be cured, and also do not have a strong connection in the deaf community and prefer to use oralism instead of signing. Each culture has its own unique language, sometimes even more than one language. It is what connects people within their culture. ASL, also known as American Sign Language, is a language that is used amongst the deaf community. Here's an example of ASL. What I signed is tomorrow morning I need to go to work, but I want to stay home and sleep. But I need to make money so I will have money. ASL was created in 1817 by Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet and by a French sign language teacher, Laurent Clark. ASL has a close relationship with LSF, which is the sign language that is spoken in France, as it was created using the same signs. ASL is express movements of hand gestures, and facial expression. It has the same properties as the spoken language. The only difference is that the grammar structure of ASL is different from English. It is not a direct copy of English. An example of that would be I go store, when you would say I'm going to the store. All of these things are important to deaf culture. There are many more, but these are just the ones that stand out to me. First, I talked about deaf pride and how it is important to one's culture. Next, I talked about capital D for deaf, which is important to the deaf community in showing who they are. And lastly, I talked about ASL. ASL, which is the language that is used in the deaf community and makes them who they are. Deaf culture is out there, and yes, you might not have heard about it, but it is the study of culture, language, and stigma that comes along with being deaf. Deaf culture is a beautiful, beautiful culture. Once you learn about it, it's a little complicated at first to learn, but once you learn, you will never forget it.